This woman receives donor eyes from the dead that allow her to see death approaching others. The film opens with a nighttime atmosphere filled with the shouts of many people calling someone a witch while throwing stones. Inside the house being pelted with rock, a woman is seen standing on a small chair, intending to hang herself. Suddenly, a black, shadowy figure lunges toward her and knocks away the chair she is standing on, causing the woman to die by hanging. The film then truly begins and shifts to the story of a woman named Sydney. Sydney is a successful classical violinist from Los Angeles, but behind her success lies something even more remarkable, as she is actually blind. Sydney has been blind since she was 5 years old due to a fireworks accident. She now lives alone in her apartment and is able to walk to her violin practice sessions using only her cane. Being blind from such a young age has caused her other senses to become highly trained. So even without her sight, Sydney is still able to carry out her daily activities without difficulty.
I can feel the sun on my face. That's not entirely true.
After finishing her activities, Sydney returns home and appears eager to undergo a corneal transplant. She has long awaited the moment when she can finally see like a normal person again. After receiving a donor, Sydney is scheduled to undergo the transplant surgery the following day. After the surgery, Sydney befriends a young patient at the hospital named Alicia. Alicia tells her that she has been staying in the hospital for a long time. And from that moment on, Sydney and Alicia become close friends who often share stories with each other. A few days later, it is time for Sydney to have the bandages removed from her eyes. At first, her vision does not immediately become clear like normal eyesight, as everything still appears blurry, and she is told she must wait for some time for her condition to stabilize.
I want you to try and reach out. Okay?
That night, Sydney wakes up after hearing strange noises. She then sees the shadow of an elderly female patient beside her, waking up and being led away by a black, shadowy figure. Curious, Sydney begins to follow the elderly woman, but unsettling things start to happen around her.
Mrs. Hellman.
The next day, Sydney learns that the elderly woman passed away during the night. She is confused because she clearly remembers seeing the woman walking through the hospital corridor the night before. At this point, Sydney has not yet realized that she witnessed the ghost of the elderly woman being taken away by a manifestation of death. After spending some time recovering, Sydney is finally allowed to leave the hospital. Before departing, Sydney and her sister Helen say goodbye to Alicia and capture their moment together using Alicia's camera. Upon arriving at her apartment, Sydney is surprised by the presence of her friends who come to welcome her home. Since her vision has not yet fully returned to normal, she is still adjusting to coordinating what she sees and hears amid the noise, which leaves her slightly overwhelmed by the crowd. Because of this, and in an effort to help Sydney align all her senses, she consults a doctor named Paul. Paul helps Sydney recover and guides her in learning to use her new eyesight so it can synchronize with her other senses.
You damaged your corneas when you were 5?
It's a whole new level of confusion. Too many distractions. I mean, how do you concentrate?
I'm gonna help you to see the world like it really is, okay?
As time passes, Sydney's vision gradually becomes brighter and clearer. However, behind her happiness, she begins to see things she does not want to see. Sydney frequently experiences visions of fire and people who are dying, and at times she feels as if her apartment itself is changing. One night, she sees a shadow repeatedly passing in front of her door. Driven by curiosity, Sydney steps outside her apartment and discovers that the figure is a young boy wearing a raincoat. The boy asks her if she has seen his report card. Confused, Sydney intends to take the child back to his parents. But when she briefly turns her head, the boy suddenly disappears.
Do you live here, sweetie?
Have you seen my report card?
Your report card.
From that moment on, Sydney starts to feel that there is something wrong with her new eyes. These experiences make it difficult for her to concentrate during violin practice. Sensing that something is troubling Sydney, the orchestra conductor Simon invites her to have lunch and talk. While Simon goes to place an order, a mysterious woman suddenly appears and passes straight through Sydney's body. shocking her so badly that she falls and draws everyone's attention.
When there was nothing to worry about. 42? Yeah.
I told you I was gonna do it.
There was a woman.
Sydney tries to explain what happened to Simon, but he dismisses it as a hallucination. After Sydney leaves, a clear handprint appears in a pile of spilled sugar, indicating that an unseen presence has indeed been disturbing her. Then Sydney decides to have her eyes examined, believing that there must be something wrong with them that is causing her to experience frequent hallucinations. Accompanied by Paul, she goes to the hospital. But after a thorough examination, no abnormalities are found, and her eyes are declared perfectly healthy. Paul once again reassures Sydney that what she is experiencing is normal during the adjustment period and advises her to train her vision by watching television. While watching TV, Sydney suddenly sees something strange again, as her entire room appears to be engulfed in flames with many people burning inside it, but it turns out to be only a nightmare. Panicked, Sydney rushes out of her apartment while trying to call Helen, but she cannot reach her. On the street, Sydney accidentally bumps into a woman, yet strangely, the woman's body passes straight through hers. Both of them stop in shock, confused by what just happened, and moments later, Sydney notices that the woman's body is lying on the road, having just died after being hit by a car. Sydney then sees the woman's spirit being taken away by the terrifying black shadow she has seen before, and the shadow growls angrily at Sydney after realizing that Sydney can see it. Shortly after, both the black shadow figure and the woman's spirit vanish without a trace. Seeking refuge, Sydney enters a Chinese restaurant to calm herself down while calling Paul and urgently asking him to come as soon as possible. While waiting for Paul to arrive, Sydney once again begins to experience strange and unsettling events. The stove in the kitchen suddenly explodes, startling Sydney.
Excuse me.
When she opens her eyes, she sees that the restaurant has turned into rubble. Not long after, Paul arrives at the scene. In panic, Sydney explains that the restaurant had been perfectly fine just moments earlier, but suddenly turned into ruins. Paul tells her that a fire had occurred at the restaurant a week ago, killing everyone inside. At that moment, Sydney realizes that she has been seeing supernatural beings all along. She can see things that ordinary people are not meant to see, such as the black, shadowy figure that often comes to collect the souls of those who have just died. Because of her new eyes that allow her to see spirits, Sydney struggles to distinguish between what is real and what is not. Even after explaining everything to Paul, he refuses to believe her. Feeling frustrated, Sydney decides to leave Paul. When she enters an elevator, she sees an old man standing with his back to the door, but when Sydney checks the security camera monitor, the elevator is actually empty. She immediately realizes that the old man is a ghost and refuses to get in. Sydney then chooses to take another elevator after making sure there is no ghost inside. At first, she thinks everything will be fine, but the ghost suddenly appears in the same elevator with her. Panicking, Sydney desperately tries to open the elevator doors. Fortunately, the doors open just before the ghost can move closer to her. After leaving the elevator, Sydney encounters the boy wearing a raincoat once again. The boy keeps asking about his missing report card, but Sydney tells him that she has not seen it. Suddenly, the boy jumps out of the apartment window. Shocked, Sydney rushes to the window and looks down, but there is no body below. Moments later, the boy suddenly appears again and starts chasing her. Sydney finally realizes that the boy is actually a ghost. Once inside her apartment, Sydney locks the door, smashes all the lights, and covers her eyes with a cloth. At this point, she wishes she were blind again so she would not have to see such terrifying things. Sydney begins to withdraw from the outside world, no longer going to work or socializing with anyone, which deeply worries the people closest to her. Eventually, Paul forces his way into Sydney's apartment, and seeing how distressed she is, he immediately takes her to the hospital to treat the injury on her hand. That night, while Sydney is staying at the hospital, Alicia comes to visit her. Alicia says that she has to leave soon, and Sydney tries to stop her, only to realize that Alicia is being taken away by the black, shadowy figure. This signifies that Alicia has died, and her spirit is being collected by that black, shadowy figure.
You're back. I have to go now.
Wait, hang on.
Alicia.
When Sydney later wakes up, Helen is already there and gives her a photo of Sydney and Alicia that they took before Sydney left the hospital. However, when Sydney looks at the photo, she becomes confused and asks Helen who the woman in the picture is. Helen tells her that it is Sydney herself. Confused and shaken, Sydney rushes to the bathroom to look at her reflection, and it is then revealed that since she regained her sight, Sydney has never seen her true face. The face she has been seeing all along is that of another woman she does not recognize. And no matter how many times she looks in the mirror, Sydney always sees that woman's face instead of her own.
Alicia's mother wanted you to have this.
It's you, Sydney. That's not me. You're scaring me.
All of this makes Sydney even more curious about the identity of the person who donated the eyes she now has. After searching for information online, Sydney learns that when someone receives an organ transplant, fragments of the donor's memories or emotions can sometimes be carried over into the recipient's body. This concept is known as the theory of cellular memory. What Sydney has been seeing could be the final memories of her eye donor. Sydney then goes to meet Paul, intending to ask for the identity of the donor. However, Paul refuses to give it to her, explaining that donor identities are confidential and cannot be accessed freely. If Paul were to obtain that information illegally, he would be risking his career as a doctor. Disappointed by Paul's decision, Sydney chooses to leave.
I could lose my license.
I have to find out who she was.
You can't ask me to do that.
Hold on to that license.
In her apartment, Sydney once again looked at herself in the mirror and felt that the face she saw every time was not her own, but the face of the woman who had donated her eyes to her. Sydney then tried to communicate with the owner of those eyes, asking what she wanted. Suddenly, Sydney's hand moved on its own, as if it were being controlled by the donor of the eyes. After that, Sydney experienced another vision of a fire incident and began to think that the fire might have been the cause of the woman's death.
What do you want? But how can I if you won't even tell me?
Sydney tried to search for the woman's identity on her own, but suddenly Paul came to see her. Secretly, Paul had obtained information about the identity of the eye donor and explained that the woman's name was Anna, who came from Mexico. After Anna's death, her eyes were taken to be donated, and Sydney turned out to be the most suitable recipient. Without wasting any time, the two of them immediately traveled to Mexico to meet Anna's mother.
Your donor was from Mexico. You get car sick? Your donor was Ana Cristina Martinez.
Upon arriving in Anna's hometown, Sydney once again saw the ghostly figure of someone burned by fire and asked Paul to pull over in front of a ruined building. Sydney realized that the place had once been destroyed by fire and that everyone inside had died in the blaze. Paul then asked a young boy who was playing nearby, and the boy explained that the place used to be a ceramic handicraft factory, but a massive fire had killed all the workers, including the boy's older brother. Before leaving, the boy briefly mentioned a witch who was believed to have caused the fire. Then, they continued their journey to Anna's mother's house. When they arrived, Sydney and Paul met Mrs. Martinez, Anna's mother. As soon as Mrs. Martinez and Sydney looked at each other, she immediately realized that Sydney had her daughter's eyes. Mrs. Martinez then began telling them about Anna. Anna was an introverted teenager who had a special gift since birth. One day, while Mrs. Martinez was working at a ceramic handicraft factory, Anna came to warn her that the place was going to burn down. Anna saw many black shadow figures there, meaning many deaths were about to happen. She tried to save her mother and everyone in the factory, but no one believed her. Not long after Anna was chased away from the factory, a massive explosion occurred and killed many of the workers inside. The villagers blamed Anna, believing her presence caused the fire, and they came to her house, throwing stones at it while calling her a witch. Inside the house, Anna believed that her mother had died in the fire, even though in reality, Mrs. Martinez had survived by escaping just before the explosion. Thinking her mother was dead and feeling she had failed to save anyone, Anna decided to take her own life. After Anna's death, her mother agreed to donate Anna's eyes, and Sydney became the recipient. Since receiving Anna's eyes, Sydney also gained the ability to see the dead and to foresee death. While Mrs. Martinez was telling Anna's story, Sydney suddenly saw the black shadow figure appear behind her, signaling that death was approaching. Moments later, Mrs. Martinez suffered a heart attack, and Paul rushed her to the hospital, leaving Sydney alone in the house. In the basement, Sydney saw Anna's spirit still wandering. Since her tragic death, Anna's spirit had been trapped, endlessly reliving the moment of her death. This happened because Anna still felt guilty, believing that she was responsible for the deaths of many people. When Sydney saw Anna's spirit hanging herself, she tried to save her by telling her that none of it was her fault. Anna did not cause death through her visions, she merely saw what was destined to happen. Anna was not a witch, but someone who was blessed with the gift of seeing death before it came. After hearing this, Anna's spirit finally found peace and disappeared. After their business was settled, Sydney and Paul quickly left Mexico. In the car, Paul mentioned that Mrs. Martinez had passed away at the hospital. When they reached the border, they were caught in a massive traffic jam caused by a police chase of a criminal, which forced all vehicles trying to cross to stop to allow the operation to proceed. At that moment, Sydney began seeing black, shadowy figures entering the cars in the line. She immediately realized that these shadows were harbingers of death, signaling that a major incident was about to occur, one that would claim many lives. The vision reminded Sydney of the recurring fire dreams she had been experiencing. Slowly, she understood that these dreams were not memories from Anna's past, but a depiction of a fire disaster that was about to happen right then. Amid the traffic, Sydney noticed a gasoline truck and realized it was going to explode.
You what? Sorry.
Everything I dreamed wasn't from Anna Christina's life. It was from this. You have to believe me.
Aware of the limited time and determined not to repeat Anna's tragic fate, Sydney used her ability to warn the people around her. She tried to convince Paul that they had to save everyone there because the deadly incident was imminent. For the first time, Paul believed her and helped. Sydney and Paul ran from car to car, forcing people out and away from the area under the pretext of a nearby bomb. People began leaving their cars and moving to safety. Just then, the criminal's car being chased by the police collided with the gasoline truck, causing a massive explosion. While trying to take cover, Sydney's eyes were hit by flying glass shards, causing severe injury, and she was rushed to the hospital after the fiery incident.
Save them, Sydney.
At the end of the film, Sydney is shown playing the violin at a concert. It is revealed that she has become blind again due to the damage from the glass shards. However, she refuses to undergo surgery again, firmly believing that some things in this world are better left unseen. And with that, the story comes to an end.